Good evening and thank you so much for joining us. For now, the execution of an East Texas man will continue as planned after a judge denied motions to vacate the execution warrant and remove the judge assigned to the case. As KLTV7's Lauren Tier tells us, those maintaining Robert Roberson's innocence, as well as those against the death penalty entirely, packed a Palestine courtroom today, hoping for a different outcome.
I find that the evidence does not justify refusal of I'll sign orders this time denying the motion to refuse and denying the motion to vote. There's nothing further beyond judgment.
A silent courtroom after the decisions from Judge Alfonso Charles, as Robert Roberson, convicted of capital murder, watched from the Alan B. Polunsky unit via a Zoom call. This 2 days before his scheduled execution. Roberson was found guilty of killing his 2-year-old daughter, Nikki Curtis, back in 2002. He took her to the Palestine Regional Hospital, where nurses and doctors claimed to have found bruises on her body, immediately questioning Roberson's story that she had fallen off the bed. Eventually, the theory of shaken baby syndrome and abuse led to Roberson's conviction and sentencing. More than 20 years later, experts from across the country point out shaken baby syndrome theories have been proven false across the country. No autopsy was done on Nikki before his arrest. Supporters say she died from accidental and natural causes, including pneumonia and septic shock. Doctors didn't know that at the time. Roberson's seemingly indifferent demeanor during the incident criticized during the trial. His emotional response later shown to be the result of adult autism. We spoke with Roberson back in 2022.
I know it looks bad. I understand it doesn't look bad because I was the only one that was there at the time.
At today's hearing, the defense argued the assigned retired judge, Deborah Evans, quote, failed to follow the required statutory procedure for a retired judge to become eligible to accept assignment to preside over cases in lieu of elected judges. Judge Charles did not find their evidence and arguments substantial enough to vacate the execution warrant and recuse Judge Evans.
I'm enraged, I'm heartbroken, but we are not giving up this fight.
Attorney Gretchen Swin flanked by death row exonerees outside the courthouse. Also in attendance, Gloria Ruback, a longtime friend of Roberson's who drove from Houston to be at the hearing.
For him to be convicted of murder when he is the most mild-mannered, extremely religious man is just beyond comprehension. He's worried about what's going to happen, but he also said, you know, it's in God's hands.
Joining the crowd on the steps was Brian Wharton, a former detective, the lead on Roberson's case. He now believes Roberson is innocent and has since visited him in prison.
He spoke words of forgiveness to me, which were deeply meaningful to me in the moment. But if the state proceeds, whatever Robert gave me, the state will take away from me because that death will follow me for the rest of my life.
Republican State Representative Jeff Leach is one of 86 Texas legislators from both sides of the aisle who believe in Roberson's innocence.
We're going to shine a light on this case for all 31 million Texans to hear and to watch and to see, and we're hopeful that by Thursday evening we're able to secure that pause button in this case.
Stemming from that bipartisan legislative attention, tomorrow in Austin there will be a House Criminal Jurisprudence Committee hearing, one final attempt to pause the execution that is still scheduled for Thursday. According to Roberson's attorneys, they are planning to file appeals, including to the Supreme Court. In Palestine, Lauren Tier, KLTV 7 News.
And along with those efforts, a request for clemency could still be granted by Texas Governor Greg Abbott.